Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Robert Gordon's 1955 creature feature, It Came From Beneath the Sea. Now, this is one of those mid-50s horror movies that is anxious about the outcomes of scientific experimentation, particularly nuclear experimentation, or in this case, experimentation with the hydrogen bomb. And they had a fascination in the 50s and 60s with the idea of giant animals wreaking havoc on cities. Of course, Godzilla is probably the most famous example of this, but in a movie like Creature from the Green Hell, you have these giant wasps. There are movies about giant spiders, giant ants, giant whatever. Usually, they have been mutated to become of gigantic size because of radioactivity. And in this case, It Came From Beneath the Sea is somewhat the exception to that. In this film, there's a giant octopus. And when I say giant, I mean giant, like Kraken size, right? Like this is fucking taking out whole ships. It destroys a portion of the Golden Gate Bridge. It ends up climbing up onto a clock tower in, I want to say, Sausalito. I can't remember exactly what town. And just crushing this large clock tower. This is a big fucking octopus, right? Now, there are giant octopus. That's a real thing. Enteroctopus, or Enterooctopus. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. But the largest sort of documented size was 157 pounds and 11 feet long. Most of them are more in the range of just under 9 pounds and about 3.3 feet long. Sometimes about 5 feet long. That's based on Wikipedia. I'm not an octopus specialist, but I think octopi are very, very cool. So It Came From Beneath the Sea is massively blowing this up. But what's interesting is that it isn't a result of radioactivity as such, right? This was not a normal octopus that has been mutated to a gigantic, unbelievable size by radioactivity. Instead, what it is, so the Navy has these reports. The real driving force of this is that they have a nuclear sub or an atomic sub commanded by Pete Matthews, which encounters this giant octopus. They don't know what it is. Their sonar can't get a clear picture of it, and they have trouble outracing it. It ends up damaging the sub, and they need to put in for repairs. The tissue samples that they recover from the outside of the sub are given to these two marine biologists, Leslie Joyce and John Carter, who are like the top marine biologists in the country. And they determine that it is some heretofore unknown species of gigantic octopus. And what they hypothesize is that this gigantic octopus had lived in the lowest depths of a massive underwater trench. I can't remember if they say it's the Marianas Trench or not, or if it's somewhere else. But basically, they hypothesize that it had lived at these tremendous depths, so deep that it had never actually been observed by humans before. But with the testing of the H-bomb, it became irradiated, and they demonstrate in a tank on a smaller scale octopus that a that some types of fish eaten by octopus have a natural Geiger counter. They can sense radiation, and so they avoid it. Whether or not that's true, I have no idea. That may just be a science fiction conceit, but basically what it means is that the natural prey of this octopus in the lowest depths of the ocean basically can now sense it coming and flee, which means that it has had to come up toward the surface, seeking out new sources of food, which apparently means ships and people. I mean, the ships are made of metal, so I feel like if I'm a hungry ocean critter looking for a snack, my first thought is probably not going to be, I bet that big floating metal thing has some good, tasty morsels in it. But there you go. Again, it's a horror movie. It's the 1950s. We've got to have some sort of justification for this giant octopus attacking ships. Because if it was just out eating whales and dolphins and sharks and whatnot, the Navy isn't going to give a shit. So, regardless, that is what happens. This octopus is eating a bunch of people, and then the Navy basically shuts off the North Pacific, does a search for it, is unable to find it. Eventually, it ends up attacking San Francisco. They come up, mostly Leslie Joyce, comes up with this type of torpedo that is meant to function like a harpoon with a remote detonated warhead. So rather than exploding on contact, which is what a normal torpedo did, it would bury itself within this octopus and explode from the inside. The logic being that if they merely damage the octopus, then it's going to flee and it will be able to recover. But if they can successfully destroy it entirely, then game over for the octopus. Now, this is one of the things in this film that I find very interesting and very striking. The two scientists, Joyce and Carter, pretty much immediately get on board with the, yeah, let's just kill this giant octopus theory, right? Now, I understand that from the Navy, right? They've got ships to protect. They have a responsibility to guard civilian transportation, etc., etc. The two scientists, one would think, and I may have just missed this, it may have happened and I missed it, but I don't remember it occurring. Normally, in these types of films, the scientists are like, what? No, this is the only creature of its kind that we've ever observed. This is incredibly important scientifically. We should be trying to study this creature and learn all that we can, rather than treating it like an enemy that needs to be destroyed. No. The two scientists are pretty much just like, yeah, let's fucking stick a harpoon torpedo in it and blow it up. Now, that becomes a much more justified position when it attacks San Francisco and whatnot, and it is causing havoc and things. But they had been planning for how to destroy this octopus regardless. So that's striking and somewhat of an abdication, I think, of their scientific responsibility. But, you know, it is what it is. So that's all going on. Alongside the creature feature side of things, you have a love triangle developing between Leslie Joyce, John Carter, and Pete Matthews. I don't know why I gestured in that way. Leslie is in the middle. Pete Pete Matthews and John Carter are on the sides of that. They're not interested in each other. They're both interested in her. She's interested in both of them. I don't find that angle super fascinating, but it is important in terms, and this is part of, I guess it's less that I don't find it fascinating and more that I don't like it, in part because it is connected to the film's problematic depiction of gender. Leslie Joyce is initially presented as this sort of cold, aloof, oh, I'm not interested in Pete Matthews. He's a military guy, and he's probably not even smart enough to understand the stuff that I understand as a Harvard professor, which in fairness is quite possibly true. But Matthews is interested in her, and he basically sort of pursues her in a very traditional, straightforward, hey, let's get some dinner sometime type way. And, you know, whatever. It is what it is. He's trying to hook up with this woman. Fine. I mean, not fine. It's questionable predatory behavior, but it's the 1950s, so it would have been fine and normal for them. John Carter is like, hey, Pete, you should probably be aware that Leslie's part of a new breed of woman who's smart and independent, and she takes what she wants rather than waiting for a man. Okay, good. So far, so good. That bit, yes, women should be independent. They should be strong. They should be whatever it is. Leslie Joyce is also at the top of her field in marine biology. Yeah, great. Very successful, very professional, etc., etc. Good. I approve of that. The fact that much of her role in this, so she does make the sort of the breakthrough scientific discovery. She does design this new torpedo, etc., etc. But a lot of the focus of the film seems to be on her being pursued by Matthews and Carter. And that's problematic, because that suggests to us as viewers, that is the film signaling us as viewers, hey, yeah, she's a scientist, but she's a woman first. Think of her as a romantic or sexual object first. And that's not great. The other element of the gender presentation that I find problematic here is when Joyce and Carter are presenting their initial findings to the Navy, and they're like, yeah, this is octopus tissue. It must be a gigantic octopus. This is where it probably came from based on the pattern of disappearances of ships, swimmers, etc., etc. The Navy's like, yeah, but is it really though? So basically the Navy guys are like, we totally don't believe you. Which, in fairness, this is, again, a heretofore unknown creature of gigantic, pretty unimaginable size. It is perfectly reasonable. It is perfectly reasonable to be skeptical of that. When they question this explanation, Joyce gets very pouty. Carter tries to play this off as, oh, we've been working really hard and we haven't had enough sleep, and that's totally reasonable. But the fact that Joyce, the woman, gets very, again, pouty, I think is the right term for how it's played, how Faith Domergue, whose name I may be mispronouncing, if I am, I apologize, how she plays it. And I have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, she is one of the top experts in the country, probably one of the top experts in the world in this field, and she's provided reasonably conclusive proof that this is the most likely hypothesis based on the evidence. And she's now being questioned by a bunch, or not questioned, but doubted by a bunch of non-specialists who have no alternative theory that either fits the facts or doesn't fit the facts. And so it is perfectly reasonable to be offended by that, to find that problematic on their part. There seems to be a decent amount of you don't trust my analysis because I'm a woman, which is fair. I mean, that does seem to be part of the Navy guy's position. And on the one hand, that is completely fair on Joyce's part. To say, I am an expert in this. My gender has nothing to do with my ability to analyze this information and come to the most reasonable conclusion. The fact that you, as non-experts with who have not looked at any data or come up with any sort of testable hypothesis, are doubting me, yeah, that upsets me. On the other hand, it seems quite likely that as a female scientist in the 1950s, she would be very used to this. She would be used to men doubting her because even today, in 2025, the word, the analysis, the research, the argumentation of female researchers across multiple disciplines is regularly challenged and undercut by particularly men who have little to no actual knowledge of the field. It still goes on. And so, on the one hand, Joyce is probably going to be used to this, and so this very feminine pouting seems unlikely for someone who is used to dealing with this. On the other hand, this may be, I've been dealing with this fucking bullshit my whole career. I've been working really, really hard in a place I didn't want to work, on work that I didn't really want to do, and now you're doubting me, so you all can go fuck yourselves. I don't know. It's not a reasonable expectation necessarily for a film from 1955, but I would like Joyce to have been a little more, like, properly independent. And I say that with the full knowledge that in this film, she is a scientific expert. She's a professor at Harvard. She basically solves the whole problem, etc., etc. But the texture of the film continually reminds us to think of her primarily as a woman and primarily as someone who is, to greater or lesser extents, dependent on the men around her. And that's where my problem comes.